Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're watching us. Welcome to another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyera. I am your co-host, Alex Fournette, and along with me to my left is one of my two co-hosts, young up-and-coming prospect, Dylan Robler. Dylan, how you doing today?
Good, good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Nice sunny Saturday here. Ready to talk some summer hockey. Jamie, our old vet, I shouldn't say old vet prospect, but our old vet runner, may or may not be joining us tonight. That's to be determined. He has some stuff he's got to take care of outside the hockey world. So we'll see if he ends up joining in or not. But yeah, we got a good episode for you guys today. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of more of it as a recap episode, and then kind of lead and segue into some talks early next season. Have a little bit of prospect talk sprinkled in there, and then we're going to end it with some bold predictions. So, Dylan, ready?
Yes, sir.
Let me hear from you to start. How would you grade this year's Flyers offseason? Like, did you feel like it was good? Did you feel like it was underwhelming? Was it above expectations? Did it meet expectations? Give me your breakdown of where you see things right now.
Um, I think last year's as a whole was better and kind of doing a lot more than what was kind of expected, especially from a general manager for the first time and actually doing moves and creating space and getting cap back and whatever and moving cap out and making trades for picks and all that. This year, I don't think it was near to the same level. I do think it was quite overwhelming. Um, in all due respect, I don't think it should have been something crazy. I don't think we really expected it to be, but at the same time, there needed to be more. I don't like how we've kind of created this idea of kicking the can down back to the next draft in this upcoming year again. I think we've seen that multiple times before, and then it just keeps getting pushed back over and over and over again. And people become impatient, like fans, management, Comcast. Like, there's no real patience in the organization as a whole. And if you don't get fans attendance and whatever, you lose revenue, right? But the main idea here this summer was Matvei Michkov. And I mean, props to Briere and the front office for getting him here and getting all that sorted out. But now what do you do after that? Because you didn't really add or do anything else beyond some depth bodies and re-signing and all that. And I mean, that could have come next year. You could have re-signed TK next year. Like, it's just, uh, I don't know. And maybe he would have gotten more money. I don't know. But then you trade him. So, like, there's so many options. Like, and props to them. I'm glad Michkov's here. That was the main thing. You could say that was the big thing this summer. But I just think there could have been or should have been more. Um, Pretty much just as a whole, like, I wasn't really thrilled with everything, like, especially seeing the Sharks go out and do what they did and, like, other rebuilding
Splash up.
teams, they're going out and making these moves, but the Flyers have decided to just kinda sit back and wait, and I don't really know what they're waiting for because at a certain point in time, you have to start getting better, and when is that time? Because it never really came with Chuck Fletcher. He failed I wouldn't say he failed, but we got bad luck with Ryan Ellis and like all these other things that happen. If you don't want to be bad enough to get a good draft pick, you have to go out and get players, but you're also not doing that either. And then so you're in this middle ground that we've been in forever. So it's just repeating things and just I don't know. Um as a whole, I'd probably grade the offseason as like a B-ish, but that's mainly Mitchkov carrying it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Without Mitchkov coming over and then just everything else, it's probably a C or close to a C minus. So, I don't know, just picking away at a few things. I think there could have been better. It could have been better organized or like better situated to help the Flyers out, especially with other teams doing what they were doing. So, I don't know. We'll see what this year brings and what the draft brings next year because it's going to be a big thing. And if it's not, then we're just again recycling through. So I don't know. We'll see.
I like a lot of the points you made, and I definitely agree. One major thing that you bring up that I want to piggyback off of is the fact that you bring up them kicking the can down the road, and that has felt like a constant since about 2012. Ever since that second round run they had where they lost to New Jersey, it really has just been this wave of middle ground mediocrity where you're a bubble team. One year you make the playoffs, lose the first round, then you just miss, and you're hanging right around that. And then since that 2020 COVID run, they haven't made the playoffs since. This team has really when I look at this year's offseason, it really comes down to what your expectations are. And I wanted the Flyers to do more. I absolutely agree. And I don't like the fact that they did kind of kick it down the road a little bit. I do understand for the sheer fact that they should have a lot more cap space in 2025. 2024, they were kind of a little bit in a tighter position with all the dead money that they have. They have some Kevin Hayes dead money. I think they have some Tony DeAngelo dead money. I think the Lindblom dead money's gone. Ryan Ellis sitting on LTIR and not using him. That's over $6 million just wasting away. Cal Peterson, going to be pretty much buried in the minors. He was making $5 million. I think that cuts down to $3.875 million when he goes down to the AHL. So I definitely understand the perspective of you have all this money tied up to guys who are literally not doing anything here. It's probably at well over $12, $13 million. So that definitely eliminates some level of flexibility. And when you're in a flat cap that we're in right now because of the COVID pandemic, it does make things a little more complicated. But there are ways to maneuver things. And Danny showed it last year in that Ivan Provorov trade, getting a third team to pretty much help construct that trade they made with Columbus and having LA thrown in there. It took a little bit of dead money, but you got a first round pick back, which turned into Oliver Bonk, who is looking like he's going to be a decent prospect for this team. You dump the Provorov contract in general. So there are avenues and ways to make things work. My biggest thing is I wish they really addressed the center spot, and they didn't. They seem like they're content at least for another year to stick with Frost and Couturier as their top six centers, which I'm not overly thrilled about. Like, I like Frost, but I feel like he's been too inconsistent to really say you're going to rely on this guy to be a top six center again. If you at least had another guy you could have fit in that spot and you could have maybe had the comfort to drop him to the 3C if necessary. And then obviously Couturier weaned off in the second half of the year with the sports hernia. So, you bring up the Sharks and how many moves they've made, how creative their moves just in general have been. You draft Dickinson, you draft Celebrini, you already have Will Smith here. You make the trade for Emily Schaaf out in Nashville. So now you have a goalie, you have two good centers, you have a defenseman. Now they still have a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong; they're going to be bad for at least another 2 years minimum. But this is what their plan is. They're going to be building to the draft and doing this the right way. Now getting Michkov over here is a big deal. You have your franchise guy here now. So Briere definitely gets a thumbs up from me there. But when you as I just used in comparison, when you use the Sharks as an example, and you do so little after that, it makes you scratching your head as why didn't you do more to try and make this team better? You drafted Jet Luchenko with the 13th overall pick when Boyum was there at 12, and you decided to trade down. You could have got Cole Eiserman. You could have got Kostas Helenius. There was some guys there that felt like that could have been worthwhile. You trade your other first-round pick for Edmonton's, and you're loaded with draft opportunities now in 2025. You have 6 picks in the first 2 rounds. Would be 6 picks in the first 45, assuming the Flyers don't make the playoffs again, which we'll see. Depends. Maybe Michkov carries them. Who knows? But I look at this offseason as an offseason where it was more worrying about what you had than in locking them up or getting them here in Michkov's case than ways to improve from the outside. You got rid of Cam Atkinson, bought him out. You got rid of Mark Stahl, thank God. You re-signed Eric Johnson. You extended Garnet Hathaway. I like the contract, but I didn't feel like it was a necessary move to make. And then there's the Konechny extension. Me and you, I kind of feel like we're in a similar path. That I I'm not overly crazy about the deal. We'll see if it ages well. I would have preferred closer to 6 years and maybe 8 mil or something like that. That you could actually talk me into, especially now that he has a no movement clause attached to him for 6 out of those 8 years. So you essentially have Konechny locked up for 9 years now. So you need this guy to age well, or this could be an anchor for 4 or 5 of the years of that contract, and you just can't afford to have that. So when I look at this year and give Danny a grade, um, Michkov definitely makes it where you can't give it a failing grade for sure. I'd probably give it a C plus, B minus, maybe B minus range. I think it's probably a little bit better. You got Michkov over. You got rid of some of the dead weight, even though now you have Cam Atkinson, another dead money guy I didn't even mention, now on the books for another 2 years. So you have him there gone, Mark Stahl gone, who has nothing left. But it didn't really create much of a path on defense for some of these guys to come up. You re-signed Zamula, which I get for being a comfort guy for Michkov, which I guess I understand that perspective of things. Um, you didn't move a guy like Ristolainen. You have this log jam at wing still, and you still have question marks at center. So 2025, a year from now, they better make moves or heads have to roll. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts. You have plenty of draft picks. You have cap, but you have guys to sign. Forster, York,
Exactly.
Frost. I feel like I'm missing one or two guys. But anyway, you have some guys to sign. You have some decisions to make. You have to make sure that you have the necessary money. And you have to also be able to find a way to improve this team. Where does it go from here? I don't know. I feel like this year was okay this offseason, but it should have been better. So it really just depends what your expectations were.
Yeah.
Dylan, do you have anything to add on that?
I think as a whole, like, I think the Flyers think they have what they need. It's just a matter of waiting. Um, the Foresters and the Frosts and the Cates and all those younger guys, I think they have, or at least they think they have, like, the higher end potential in them. It's just a matter of waiting and seeing how that turns out, um, which is fine. But I think you also have to address it outside of the room. Like, they think they have what they need now, and so they don't think they need to add as much, which I think they do still. And I think you need to make decisions on who you move on from, especially with contracts coming up. And that's also why I don't think they're going to have as much cap as they think they will, because next year they have to sign some big names, and they're not going to be light contracts, especially with how the Flyers handle them. So especially if Cam York has another breakout year and plays top line minutes, like, there's so much that goes into considering this, and your cap suddenly disappears almost when you sign or re-sign 4 other guys that are already in your team. So, and in my opinion, the Flyers never really got used to the cap. It's just something, like, they were way better when cap wasn't an issue. They could go out at the deadline and sign these big names and compete for the cup every year because they didn't have to worry about a salary cap. But now, since the lockout, they've struggled and gone back and forth with stuff because they can't quite figure out the cap. And I think that's been a problem for them as a whole over the last 15, 20 years. Um, and just not addressing issues that they actually have. I mean, I would have much rather preferred the Flyers went with a smaller type of draft rather than drafting these big guys. I do really like a few of them, but at the same time, you have to play to what the skill level is now. You can't have big body defensemen playing against Connor Bedard and hoping that they somehow lock him down. That's just not how this works anymore. And to ignore the Bunhams, the Cole Hudsons, the Isermans, the whatever it may be, and drafting these other guys that are 6'4", 6'1", 200 pounds, I don't really like that. I mean, it's so weird to me that you're depending on those kind of guys like the Hunter McDonald's, the Spencer Gills, the like those types of guys. But meanwhile, they're also only 170 pounds. So they need to still get more weight on them, like Travis Sanheim dealt with for a couple of years. Like these kids are skinny, but they're 8 feet tall. So you draft them. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just, that's something that's always bugged me in recent years is how big the Flyers draft, and then they'll draft like one or two really small kids that are like 5'7" and 160 pounds and hope that they can somehow make the NHL, like the Barkeys or the Ilya Potov. Like they have great potential. They're very talented, but you're making it a lot harder on them to make the NHL and fight for a roster spot when they're not that big. And they can't add as much weight either because then it takes away from their skill. So they're gonna get buried. Like it's just those kinds of things. So I mean, and even the draft picks aren't that high either. Like the six that you have, one of them might be in the top 12, depending on where you place, probably more to the top 15 range. And then all the other ones are late round picks. They're very late, and you could have just done that last year anyways at 32. The skill level between the 15 to like 80 range of a draft is usually pretty similar every year. Like there's a few dark horses and a few lucky guys in there, but typically you're not going to find another Cole Hudson in that 32 range. And rather you just dumped it to Edmonton for a pick that you don't even know if it'll be in 2025 or 2026 yet. And it's going to be in that same range anyways. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be 28 to 32 anyways. So I just don't understand the point of saying, all right, this draft's kind of whatever. Let's just kick the can down. But a lot of people liked this draft and liked what they had or what they could have had. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just little things like that and getting more offense to where you need it with centers and younger, smaller defensemen and actually getting offense from them rather than these locked down old school type of players that they can help and add depth, but how much depth do you need to the point of just Matvei Michkov
Mm-hmm.
with barely one guy? He doesn't really have a Leclerc yet. And
Yeah.
you're kind of ignoring that right now and thinking, oh, we might have it in our system somewhere. But other than that, you just have a bunch of depth everywhere. So I don't know.
It's going to be interesting because you make some very good points, especially about the draft, because Edmonton's, I believe, is what, top 12 protected, I want to say. And realistically, I don't see them. I think the floor for Edmonton next year is probably the second round. So if you're lucky, maybe you get that in the mid 20s. Colorado, I think they're top 10 protected. So I may have got the two mixed up, but so they're probably like top. I mean, again, if you're lucky, maybe Colorado gets knocked out in the first round because they're dealing with some cap issues themselves. So yeah, you're looking at a situation for sure where a lot of these picks are more going to be just late round dart throws that you hope that one or two of them really stick as a long term future player here. So I definitely agree with your point here. Whatever they're going to do, whatever their plan is, it needs to be in case and effect by the latest next year because your cap situation still isn't going to be great next year, as you mentioned. You have Cates, York, Frost, and Forrester all coming up. I think they have about maybe 18 million at the moment, assuming the cap goes up. Um, and it's just going to be a tough situation. You got to probably find a way to get rid of that Ristolainen contract, in my opinion, not just for cap perspective, but to give some of these guys like a Drane or a Hunter McDonald or a Ronnie Attard an opportunity to move into the lineup. So it's really going to come down to just finding that possible openings for these guys. So with that being said, let's actually move into prospect talk since we're on the subject. Dylan, you posted a piece earlier this week about actually, I think it was August 16th, I want to say, on the Flyers.
Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. The Flyers nitty gritty. Check it out, everyone, by the way, flyersnittygritty.com. Dylan and Jamey both write some excellent pieces there. Give them a follow on social media. They're absolutely excellent. If you got some articles you ever want to read, Both of them put some A quality stuff out there, so give them a follow on that. But on Flyers and nitty-gritty.com, you put out an article of the Flyers top 25 prospects. So currently you have 25 to 16 posted. There's two that caught my eye. I just wanted to bring them up where you have them positioned and as to why. The first one I really caught my eye was number 19. You have Hunter McDonald ranked there. What is your reasoning behind that? Because I see a lot of Flyers fans seem to hype him up a bit and have him a little bit higher than that. What has you put McDonald in the 19th position?
Well, last year I even had him at 16, or I guess in January. Um, yes, there's a lot to like about him. As I previously mentioned, with like the bigger size and his old school style of play, because that doesn't come around a lot. He's a very locked down, physical player,
Mm-hmm.
and I do personally like him. But it's just keeping it realistic, really. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's a top 15 guy. Um, he's probably just on the outside of that, like the 16-20 range.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes down to his overall ability to play pro hockey at the AHL, NHL level. It's a matter of transitioning everything, and he was a sixth round pick for a reason. Like, obviously he was kind of underrated, and it was kind of a good pick from Fletcher, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time you just have to keep things realistic. Um and that's why I have him at 19. It's not because he's bad. It's just because I think there is actually 18 players better than him,
Mm-hmm.
and for good reason. It's just what can he bring as a whole? Like, I wouldn't say he's one dimensional, but there's a limitation to what he can do. He can score goals. He can be a little bit of a playmaker, but his defensive abilities is what he's known for,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big thing, especially for a depth team. But it's just keeping things on a straight path and an honest thing, because he's going to be a depth piece. He's going to be a second, third pairing guy, and I don't want fans to think it's just because Jonesy really likes him or other
Mm-hmm.
people really like him. I don't want people to think, oh, he's going to be a first pair guy with
Yeah.
Drysdale or something.
Yeah.
Like, those guys aren't really what they're meant to be. It's more meant to be a depth guy. And if he doesn't put up 40 points somehow as a defenseman, you kind of look at things and you're like, well, what is this guy? Well, he's not meant to be a point producer. He's meant to just be a lockdown guy that doesn't always
Mm-hmm.
show up on the score sheet. So he's supposed to be a minute guy. He's supposed to put 20 minutes up a night and just help and have a positive plus minus and win you a game. So I really like him, but I don't think he should be any higher, or hopefully not any lower, really, than 20, I would think.
What do you see as his overall ceiling if he were to make the NHL hypothetically?
I would say a second pairing guy. Again, not a lot of points. It's hard to kind of put him into like a frame or like a comparison. Like, I don't know how many points Dustin Bufflin put up in his prime, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say he would be used kind of like a Dustin Bufflin with a hard shot from the point, and he's
Mm-hmm.
very physical. And yeah, yeah, it's definitely a second pairing. I don't see him being ever a first pairing guy unless it's like there's 100 injuries and it's just
That would be,
whatever.
yeah.
Um, he can be a good penalty killer. Good on special teams, but yeah, probably just a second lockdown kind of guy.
Okay, fair enough. So probably like that 4 or 5 defenseman range sounds like about right for him. I
Yeah.
like McDonald's game. I feel like Bufflin is a good comp for him. His defensive abilities are solid. I want to see how he transitions when he continuously gets more time in the AHL. Obviously, he's probably not going to be here this year. There's way too much of a log jam anyway. Maybe
Yeah.
25 or 26 might be a little more realistic when some of these guys might be able to be moved, like the Ristolainens or the Eric Johnsons of the world, or even Zamula later down the line. You'll get some openings for a guy like that, and we can see potentially what he can
And like, that's exactly a point I want to make as well. Like, if you want to build through your pipeline and what you have now, When is the time to do that? Because
Yeah.
you're a rebuilding team, you're supposed to be playing your young guys right now. You're not supposed to be having a Ristolainen or a Mark Stahl or a Johnson or whatever on this back end, or even up front with Hathaways and Palings and Laughtons. Like, when do you finally give these kids shots? Some of them might not be ready for the NHL, whatever, but give them 12 games. See if they actually are ready or what they need to fix still. Because
Mhm.
they're Oh my god,
That
that was
was
loud.
loud. Apologies,
Um,
my significant other's text message thing is attached to the
oh,
laptop.
no,
Sorry, continue.
it's all good. But, like, when is the time? Because some of these kids, they're not getting younger. Like, Andre's close to 25, Addard's up there, like, these kids are 22 to 25. Like, yeah, that's pretty young still, but, like, they're probably getting tired of waiting as well. Like, obviously, some of them decreased and improved or whatever, but just give them 10 games. Like, you gotta see what you have here, and sitting them in the AHL for another whole season doesn't really do that. Like, our back end everywhere is pretty much log jammed, and it shouldn't be as a rebuilding team. You should have free will to move whoever you want, where you want right now. This
And
is
this is
not a
my
contending
biggest
team.
criticism too. Like when it
It's
comes to what they're in, just because
it's
they
just
have no movement. Like they've got to find a way to get rid of that Ristolainen contract this year. That, in my opinion, is a must. Not just for cap space flexibility, but just having the ability to bring guys like a McDonald or a Drane or an Addard up who you believe really deserve that opportunity. They're not going to wait and be patient in the AHL forever. You want to give these guys a chance. Ronnie Addard had a little bit of a chance last year when you got bit with the injury bug. I didn't think he played half bad. I mean, I didn't think he was great. Like, you had him at third pairing minutes, but for the situation he was played against, they were in a run against a lot of these playoff teams. He played pretty. I remember there was a game against Florida when they were on that 2-game Florida road trip. When I think the Flyers won the game 2-1, he made a one or two really good defensive plays that game that really kept them in the game, where they ended up getting a game-winning goal in the final minutes when Hathaway just tapped in a greasy one. Guys like that deserve that type of opportunity. Uh, Adam Ginning was part of that game too. So, and he's another example. They've got to find ways to open up the defensive pipeline where there's at least a path for these guys.
Yeah, and the
Um,
only time that that gets a look is when there's injuries or something.
exactly.
Jennings only got a look because he of injuries, and then you re-sign him, he's not gonna see the NHL.
No,
You
not
re-sign him
whatsoever.
to put him in the AHL again rather than him going home, and that's another body you lose to maybe open up some things a little bit more. Like, he seems to be one of the guys that you call up when there's injuries, but he barely gets a look when there is. So when there isn't, because there's so many guys on that back end. You have like 7 guys in the mix right now, and 6 of them can play a night, and you're just gonna sit 1 or 2 in the press box every night. Like, it just I don't know. There's so much clogged, just jammed all together, and it just doesn't fit. It's a mess.
And that was a big reason why I was not in on re-signing Zamula. Like I said, I understood the reasoning behind the whole transition thing for Michkov.
Pick one or the other. Like,
Exactly. You have Fedotov here right now as well. He's a Russian body. You brought Michkov over here months ahead of time so he can get a little more accustomed. He's learning the English language. Obviously, he's not going to have it fully down pat by the time the season begins, but he should be able to at least communicate a little bit, understand hockey lingo a little more. For that reason, I don't understand the point of re-signing a guy like Zamula. I get it, but at the same time, I don't, because of that log jam.
yeah.
But anyway, not to get too far off track, the other guy I wanted to mention you have here is Noah Powell, who is someone I friggin' loved at the time. 5th-round pick in this year's draft. You have him currently 18. Obviously, he was not available in your ranking last year because he wasn't part of the prospect pool. He looked pretty good in the World Juniors. What's your analysis of him? Where do you see his realistic ceiling? This is one guy I've been ranting about since they picked him.
He was really tough to rank. I think I had him in like 12 range at one point. But it was just a matter of him being an overager last year and seeing the difference between his first year to this year. He had like barely scraped the barrel of points as an 18-year-old, and then as an overager and re-entry into the draft, he obviously exploded. And obviously that's not to say he's not a great player. Like, obviously you still have to be good enough to put up points like that and lead, the league or his team or whatever. But I think it was just too small of a sample size for me to say, okay, you're a top 12 prospect, top 10, whatever. I think there's still some work to be done there. And I think he could, say, next year be in my top 12, top 10-ish range. But it's just a matter of sample size and then going to Ohio State and just actually getting a look in the NCAA rather than the UCHL. Two completely different leagues, two very different style of plays and kind of how much you play and what you can get out of both leagues. So, I mean, 74 points in 61 games is hard to ignore. He would probably be a second line kind of guy with first line potential. I think his ceiling is a 2C, or what position is he in? Right wing, sorry. A 2 right wing kind of guy. Because he has the size, 201 pounds, 6'2". But yeah, right now I think it was just from sample size and what I've kind of gathered so far. It can definitely change quickly, especially after I see him, in college and what else he can bring. Because he is a very, I don't like to use the word dynamic as much as I do, but he can be physical. He can score goals. He can score highlight reel goals. He's overcome a lot with being functionally deaf. Like, that's insane to be at his level and do what he does and does it so well. So, I mean, there is a lot to like about him, but I think just where I have him now fits for what he is. And then maybe later down the line next year, he can reevaluate and get bumped up a bit, because that's what I did a lot this time around, was reevaluate what I did, and kind of just see where everyone properly fits rather than just kind of based off public opinion or like whatever. So, it is what it is. Like, I think last year I was kind of more of a went with like what the media was already saying about like the Kolosovs and those kinds of guys, and then I didn't really reevaluate it myself or consider it myself. So that's what I'm trying to do this year and really make my own proper rankings rather than looking at other people's. So yeah, that's kind of where Powell is where he is.
Gotcha. And if, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't noticed, our veteran Jamey Baskow has arrived.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. Dylan, how are you? Alex, how you doing? Sorry I'm a little late, man. The nephews are here, the family's here, and they're ready to go to the Bay. But I was like, hold on, I need to go on this show for at least 10 minutes or something.
Well, I guess your timing couldn't have been much better. We're actually about to segue into what we believe our team's top 5 prospects are right now. I was going over Dylan's article, and I had some questions on some of his rankings and his reasons behind it. So now we're going to move into where we have the top 5 rankings of this team and as to why. So, Jamey, since you're here, let me start with you.
Yeah, I think Dylan had a great piece. So if people haven't seen it, I like how he has his own rankings. It doesn't care what other people think. These are his personal rankings, and he's scouted and has watched a lot of these players, and if not all of them, and he just doesn't formulate his opinions out of midair. I respect that. I respect, Broad Street Hockey's, analysis on theirs. I respect Charlie O'Connor's and, Alex Appleyard and all them, with their rankings that they typically do. Everyone has their own rankings, and, none, are more right than the others. Their personal opinions, and their opinions for a reason. So my personal number one, obviously, is Matvei Michkov. I think that's a no-brainer there, and that's pretty self-explanatory. We've beaten over this drum, over the course of the past 3 to 4 weeks, even longer than that, because there was speculation if he would come, if he wouldn't come. So I say we as a whole, like with you and Dylan and Rick for that matter, and Cam, and Matt, everyone has, obviously explained why he would be the number one, for the Philadelphia Flyers. My number two, honestly, is Alexei Kolosov. I firmly believe that Alexei is coming over. I think that if he wasn't, they would know something by now. I think that's just with Dynamo starting up here. They have two goaltenders that they were searching. There was a rumor about Carter Hart, possibly going to Dynamo. What was that, about a month ago or something of that nature? That they were searching for another goaltender possibly. But with them, recently starting here for their training camp, and he's a no-show there. I think it's all set in stone for Alexei to come over. I think that he realizes that it was much harder. I'm not saying he wanted to come back, and I'm not saying that he didn't want to come back, because honestly, no one, really knows, right? This is all just, sourcing information that, people have formulated to include everyone here. But I firmly believe he's coming. So he would be my number two, in the Flyers organization. I am very high on Alexei. I think his skills are, over, reason. My third actually is going to be a tongue twister. And believe it or not, I think I'm going to throw a lot of people to the wayside. I think it's Ivan Fedotov. I think he is going to be better than what people believe. And yes, he is a rookie. He didn't play in the amount of games that would suit him, take him away from his rookie status. So for me, Fedotov is pegged at 3. I think he's going to be a solid backup to Samuel Ersson this year. I want to give him opportunity to prove us otherwise. I mean, his numbers throughout his KHL career, speak for themselves. So until he blows up, or yes, I know his age is 27. I know he's coming in as an overager, and stuff like that for reasons, everyone knows why, what happened through his history, but he's my number 3. My number 4, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty high on Oliver Bonk. I love Bonk. I think that Bonk, adds another dimension, to what will be here in 2 years. I think that he's very good on the power play, and the Flyers are horrendous on the power play. I think that, they could really use, him, here in the near future. My 5th has changed. My 5th is Jet Luchenko. I'm pretty high on Jet. The Flyers need speed, and speed is the name of the game. And I'd like Jet Luchenko to add speed to formulate in his lineup, especially if he's pegged on the line with, Michkov in the future. I think Michkov, and Jet Luchenko paired together. I see. Michkov is much faster than what people give him notoriety for. He is speedy. He knows when to turn on the Jets and knows when to shut them off. Does he always, is speed the name of the game for him? No, by no means. But he's faster than what much people give him, respect for. And I think he'd be able to keep up with Jet Luchenko. So that's my 5.
Awesome. I think we're going to be pretty similar on our picks, but Dylan, let me hear yours.
I mean, not to give too much away to my rankings that I have, I'm going to try and get them out on Sunday.
It's kind of hard, right?
I know, right?
I've just been so busy.
Sneak everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously Michkov's number 1. It's not any contest. It's pretty huge gap between 1 and 2 right now. And from 2 to 5, that's been a main reason why I don't have them out yet, is because it's been so difficult for me to put guys where I think they should go.
Yeah.
And I mean, people say goalies are voodoo all the time and whatever, so that's kind of why I can't put a goalie at 2. Like, I would love to put Bjargesen there. I'm extremely high on him over any Flyers goaltender right now. And I did initially have him at 2. I've moved him back to a certain spot because it's just so difficult to rank them as a goaltender for the next 4 seasons coming up or whatever it may be. And I've also had Oliver Bonk at 2. Like, I've had Jet Luchenko, I've had Bonk, I've had Andre there. Like, there's so many options. Currently, I think Bonk kind of squeezes in there. I also had Luchenko there as well. I've personally not been high on Bonk. I've expressed that before, but I'm kind of giving him his flowers here. Like, he had a great camp, showed up, played better defensively, and has looked better recently than earlier in his season. So it's just so difficult. I think Bonk is 1 or 2 to 3, and then Luchenko's in the mix there at 2 and 3. You could also put Bonk at like 4 and have Andre up at 2. I have Andre at 4 right now. I think he still has a lot of abilities. I didn't realize how small he actually was until I really looked into him more. He's 5'9", 181 pounds. But again, he's meant to be more of an offensive kind of guy, which the Flyers do need, as Jamey mentioned, with the power play and special teams as a whole. I mean, their penalty kill has been awesome recently, but I think there's still work to be done there. Because if you can make it better, why wouldn't you? And I think Andre's kind of been put to the wayside a little bit. I think he's still 22. So, I mean, as a defenseman, you still have a lot of time there. But I still think he's a top 5, if not a top 6 prospect there. And then at 5, this kind of spoils it a little bit, but I actually have Jack Berglund. I've looked into him a lot recently, and I think he has great center potential, something that the Flyers don't have a lot of right now, especially for his size at 18 years old. He's 209 pounds and 6'3". Like, that is a big kid.
Screams powerful to me.
Exactly. And he has two-way abilities, and he's very, very physical. He's an all-around player, 200-foot game. He can score goals as well. Like, there's a lot to like about him. He has great footwork for how big he is. So, I mean, that's kind of my surprise in the top 5 there. I think I kind of surprised myself a little bit too, like just how much I found interesting in him and kind of where he fit. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of options after Michkov. That's why the rankings are so sporadic. Like, there's no real set number 2 right now or beyond that outside of top 10. You can kind of get more situational after 10, but it's very hard to put players where they are. I think I have Kolosov a lot lower than Jamey does right now, and that's for a ton of different reasons. I have Zavrigan ahead of him right now, I think, somewhere in there too. Bjarksson's above both of them. He always will be. I've been on that since they drafted him, and for some reason, people think I have a bias towards Bjarksson and this and that, but Craig Button and other guys, they've had people ahead of others too before. Like, at the draft, I think it was Button that had Luchenko going to the Flyers, and people thought
originally, originally in his original mock, he sure did.
And here we are. So anything can happen. People can have different opinions, and I personally think Bjarksson is ahead of both of them in regard to where he plays, what he does, and how he does it, and using his physical, I guess I shouldn't say physical, but his big presence. He's 203 pounds and 6'3". He's the biggest guy there, and he uses his size efficiently. And I acknowledge that in my article. I'm not just going to put him there and say, okay, it's because I like him. I'm going to back it with information and stats and whatever it may be.
Makes sense.
I have to back it up, and I will. So it is what it is, and I personally still have them in my top 6-ish range. I would have them at 2, but again, goalies are so weird and I think I need to give my flowers to Bonk and Luchenko and other guys before that. So that's kind of my mix of top 5. I know there's like 10 names in there, but it's just so difficult to really lock down a top 10 right now.
Berglund's great because I think he reminds me of Scott Hartnell. Like, he plays like around the same, and you already know how Scotty ended up. He was a 30-goal scorer, 36 goals, I think was his career high. Off the top of my head, it could be more.
37 in 2012 that happened.
Is that what it was? But he reminds me. He's got the build like him, and he skates like him. He just reminds me. I know it's different positions, but it just reminded me a lot of Scotty. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I like both your lists. Mine is relatively similar to you guys. So I made a list not counting Michkov because Michkov we all know is number one. So there's
But at the same time, I'm surprised at how many people have just like been, oh, Mishkov's not a prospect anymore. He is a prospect and he
he
played
is.
X
He
amount of
is.
games. Like I put out that the question, I was like, what is your top 5 prospects? I
Yeah, a
couldn't
lot of
believe
people
how many
responded with that
times
Mitch.
I
I
was
had
one
to
of them.
say
I can't deny that.
Michkov is still a prospect. But obviously you just put him at 1 and then move everyone back.
I wanted
But I
to
was
be a
like,
little
holy
creative.
cow. Like
Yeah, the expectations for this young man. I just hope he's able to shoulder them because, man, the pressure. There's going to be a lot of pressure. Like I feel for him in a certain way, man. Because rookie camp, you're going to see it's going to be hard to get into doors at rookie camp.
Oh, that place is going to be packed for sure. Although I did specifically say if we're not counting Michkov, so I didn't say definitely. I had to cover myself a little.
That is good defense. It is good defense.
But so yeah, Michkov is number 1. I'm going to do a top 6 just because I want to include all my guys that I had there. So Michkov's obviously number 1. It's a massive gap. He's your franchise altering winner. He's arguably the best Russian prospect we've seen in a long time. Number 2, I have Oliver Bonk. I thought him and Denver Barkey both lit it up last year in London. I think he brings something to the power play that the Flyers have truly been
Yes, he does. Yeah.
time. He really could be an elite quarterback if they end up pretty much letting his development go well. I don't want them to rush this kid. I don't see him being here obviously this year. Again, there's a log jam. 2025, 26, depending on what your defense looks like, you might be able to revisit this discussion a little more. But we'll see. We'll see where we're at in a year or 2. But his the thing about Oliver Blanc that I like so much is I think he's really smart. He's smart with the puck. He doesn't make stupid decisions. He's a kid that I look at that I really feel like that could be what you potentially saw in Shane Gostisbehere in 2016. A guy who can really be someone who can grow off of just his play on the power play, who can really help garner some plays from the point and, help just this team elevate their biggest weakness just in general on that. Number 2, I have Alexei Kolosov. Hoping he still comes over here. All 3 of the goalies were tough on this because I like Bjornsson too. Maybe not as much as Dylan, but I do like him a lot. He would be probably in like my top 7 if I had to include him. I don't have him in my top 5. I have him right around, I think, 7 right now. But he's someone that I look at that is going to be definitely someone to watch. The Flyers, in my opinion, have the best goalie pool in hockey. You have 3 guys that you look at that potentially be someone, a future starter here in Kolosov, Zavragin, and Bjornstrom. So, but I have Kolosov at 3 right now because I think he's been seasoned well out in Russia. He's someone now that hopefully he's here in the AHL and is playing when the time comes. It sounds like Danny is going to, put his foot down and say, we're not sending you back to Russia. You're under contract here. You're playing here, whether you want to be here or not. So we'll see how that goes. But he's someone who has really just seemed like has gotten better each and every year. Number 3 is Jet Luchenko. Well, number 4 is Jet Luchenko. One thing about him that stood out to me, as I mentioned in prior videos, is how good his combine was. This kid is very quick, has good lateral movement.
He's good.
He brings real speed to the game that this team is lacking. They needed a good center. They needed some good center prospects in general, and this kid could help bring that. I think his ceiling is a high 2C, maybe low end 1C, but closer to a high 2C personally. But he could be someone that could really help bring what this team pretty much has formulated their style around, and that's transitioning off the rush, which is what they were so good at last year. And I feel like Jet Luchenko fills the boxes for that great. His grip strength, too, was one of the things when it came to his combine numbers, was ridiculous. I think he was the top in the entire draft in both left and right hand, if I remember correctly. So he's someone I have up there. Then Zavragin I have as my number 4/5. I say that because the Michkov factor of this. But his numbers in the MHL and the VHL were ridiculous. He had over a .94 save percentage. I get it. That's a much lower league. We want to see how he adjusts when he eventually gets to the KHL. So I anticipate those numbers dropping, obviously. But he was absolutely lights out in the lower league. So I feel like this could be a real test for him. Hockey News Hub has been following him too, so I think they see what we see potentially in this kid. It makes me feel good that if, God forbid, things don't work out with Alexei Kolosov, they have two other really good options in net that they could potentially fall with. And as my old saying, ABG, always be drafting goalies. Always be drafting goalies. I don't care what the situation is.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Always be drafting goalies. ABDG. I got my own friggin' acronym mixed up. And my number 5/6 is Denver Barkey. I think he had about 100 points out in London last year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 100.
If I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, him in Bonks.
He killed it in the playoffs too. The OHL playoffs, he averaged well over a point per game too.
He seems like that third round hit that you've been looking for a while, and I think this kid's just going to continue to skyrocket up their rankings. I think he is a future second line plug and play guy that you can rely on consistently. Again, don't know if he's going to be like that first line game breaker you're looking for to go along with Michkov, obviously, but this feels like a guy that you can plug and play into your top six. I mean, your middle six consistently, more towards the top end of it. That feels like that's going to be able to score at will, that can move the puck well, that has good hockey sense, and I feel like he will adjust to the NHL game well.
I had him at 6. That's my guy at 6. So it's funny.
I have him a lot lower than I did last year. I'll say that.
Interesting.
I'm
looking forward to when your rankings.
I've brought him down a bit recently.
Okay. When your ratings comes out, when we need to definitely for sure bring that up in the next episode, whenever that is released. I want to talk about it a little more too, because I like that piece. I read it a lot. But yeah, let's move on to our next segment, training camp and bold predictions for the year. So training camp's right around the corner. We're just a couple weeks away. I think there's going to be a lot to watch for sure. Dylan, let me lead off with you in this segment. What's something you're watching for in training camp this year?
Like players or just as a whole?
Just as a whole. Like this is kind of a broad topic.
I don't know if there's anything to like specifically watch. In my
if you want to go even with players too, we can specifically.
I would go specifically more players. I think there's a few guys to keep an eye on. Not to say they're going to make it out of camp. I think that there's not really much space for that, given age and just what we have already. But I think these are guys to look at training camp and then continue to look at throughout the season if you don't, or if there's someone to keep an eye on you want to look at throughout the season, whatever it may be. Obviously Michkov, when he comes over, take a look at him. That's probably what you're going for if you're going. But off of that, I think Alex Bump, Hunter McDonald, Maxim Rizzo, Carson Bjargson, and Alexei Kolosov when he's there. I think those are some big names that you need to look out for and pay attention to. Rizzo's still aching from an injury, problem with an ankle sprain, I think it was. So if he's healthy, he'll be noticeable. I think he was noticeable at the rookie thing. But obviously he was injured and didn't really get much time or really get a strong look. Alex Bump has been a big name that's been circulated the last couple of years, and he's kind of made a name for himself going to Western Michigan. Rookie of the Year nominee. He was close in that regard. I'm extremely high on him. I think he has a lot of potential as a later round pick. McDonald, as I mentioned earlier, big bodied guy, lockdown defenseman, old school, very physical, will fight if need be. Rizzo, I've always liked. I don't care if he was 27, he still has to be good enough to put up the points he did. And every year in the NCAA or the NCHA, whatever you want to call it, he put up points productively. He was continually good. It wasn't He was a Rookie of the Year nominee. I think he was a runner-up. He was in Hobie Baker conversations every year. I think he was close to winning it almost if he didn't get injured that last year. Like, there's a lot to like about Rizzo, and I think he is for some reason unappreciated in the Flyers pipeline conversations, given his age and not doing the research. I think fans have kind of looked at what Charlie or other people have said and been like, okay, that's my opinion now on him. I'm not going to look into him at all myself or whatever it may be. Bjarkson, obviously, Kolosov, if he comes, he should. I don't think he will not miss training camp. And he's another guy to pay attention to because, you got some exciting guys in net, and this is the first time you'll see Kolosov really at a training camp. So, and even Fedotov maybe, because it's been a while since he's been at a full training camp. So there's a lot to like. There's a lot to look at other than Michkov. And I think fans need to also realize that.
Gotcha. Jamie, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, I'm gonna head off after this. I'm sorry. We're gonna get. So I'm gonna be honest. My most intriguing thing is Hunter McDonald. I think that he's gonna be in the running for that 6th, 7th defenseman spot there. I wouldn't say he's more intriguing than Michkov. I think Michkov gets his flowers. I think that's pretty much already, known and stuff like that. But it's going to be interesting to see. The Flyers are very high on Hunter McDonald for very good reason. He has size. He's a big body on the blue line. He could hit. He could add a little offensive flair, even believe it or not. So I think that it's going to be intriguing to see if he outplays, Igor Zamula for that 6th, position there. So Igor and, Hunter McDonald, they're going to be vying for that, 6th spot. And it's going to be quite interesting to see how it goes. So I think that to see if he makes the team, I think that's a pretty intriguing, part to me. I think that overall, I think the Flyers roster, forward-wise, it's pretty much rounded out. I'm not saying that there isn't going to be any battles. There's going to be positional battles within, line battles, lines 1 through 4. I think that'll be a battle, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory in regards to the forwards, what's happening or what's transitioning. Another intriguing thing for me leading up into training camp is to see if the Flyers have any PTOs. I'm a big fan of bringing back Nick Cousins. Because I think that he adds, another dimension, center depth wise. I think, with letting go of Tanner Lazinski and him moving on, I think that opens the door for possibly Rodrigo Abels, or Anthony Richard, possibly there, forward wise. But I want to see if the Flyers bring in Nick Cousins, on a PTO possibly to see, hey, you know what? Here's your one of those last shot type deals. Or make us see what you got. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything. They could always, let him go, a week or 2 into training camp. So that'll be interesting to see what the Flyers do in that regard as well. But another thing that's going to be interesting for me is to see if Kolosov is there. If Kolosov is there, let's see how much he could, push and maybe push Ivan Fedotov and maybe even make Fedotov even better. I think the both are, going to push each other, I think, and both make each other better. So that'll be another interesting, tidbit for me to see as well. And of course, you're going to see Jet Luchenko again, for those that may have missed, Flyers developmental camp. I think that'll be kind of neat. And let's see what happens after that. I mean, I think that, again, the Flyers defense is pretty much rounded out. Emil Andre could possibly push for that 6-7 spot as well. So I think that's the defensive side of the puck is really going to be an interesting battle, for the Flyers.
I like a lot of the points that you just made there, Jamie. And thank you again for joining in.
Yeah, take care, guys. You guys have a good one, man. Thanks for having me on.
Jamie, we'll see you next episode.
Yep.
I'm going to lead on with my next take, too, what I'm looking for. I'm going to piggyback a little bit of what Jamie just said. The battle for the 6th defenseman spot is going to be interesting. Does Zamula have it locked up? Is a guy like Hunter McDonald or Mila Drane going to push for it? I think it's more likely that they'll end up leading Zamula for not just on the ice reasons, but off the ice reasons, too, when it comes to making Michkov feel more comfortable. But can you potentially see a guy like McDonald or a Drane or a Ginning or an Adder really push for that spot? Likeliness is low, but we'll see. I want to see Bonk and Barkey over here. I want to see how they end up transitioning over, warming up a few on a rookie development. I mean, after training camp begins, just see how much they've picked up over the year out in London, just getting more comfortable and whatnot. Luchenko, obviously, we saw him in rookie development camp as well. He was guns a blazing. He looks very quick, very agile. Want to see if he has continued his progression a little bit more, how he's really fitting in. And then a guy like Noah Powell, who, as I've said earlier in this show, I'm very high on. Yeah, Kolosov is a big factor in this as well. I want to see if he ends up coming over just in general, and how invested, I think realistically is a better word to see, he is with things, because obviously there's currently some off the ice questions with him right now, whether if he even wants to be here or not. So hopefully he comes by. Hopefully, it ends up being a smooth transition here, and maybe he changes his mind. And then, Bjornsson is going to be big too. I want to see, his continuous development. And then obviously just the Michkov factor. It's going to be exciting to watch him play. It's going to be exciting to just see him continuously learn and pick up the NHL style of play after a year out in the KHL, or technically 2 years out in the KHL. So hopefully, things will continue to get better, and he really shows that flash that makes us all excited for the upcoming year. So there's definitely some things to watch in training camp. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to the rookie game against the Rangers. And then obviously some of the preseason games. This is going to be the most invested I've ever been into preseason, for the obvious. But yeah, let's end it with some bold predictions. I want to hear, Dylan, give me 3 bold predictions you got this year.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not really a bold prediction kind of guy.
Or just some predictions in general. They don't even got to be bold. Just
I don't know. It's just like so hard to kind of pick at. It's so hard to pinpoint. Like, I mean, I would love for Michkov to put up 60 points, but like it's just there's so much that goes into considering it and considering things like I think McDonald can make a case for the 6th spot if Zamula struggles or whatever it may be, but there's so much question going into training camp that there's so many options. Like so many different things can happen. There could be 3 different guys fighting for that 6th spot.
mm-hmm.
And I think Forrester has another good year. I think I don't want to say TK struggles, but I don't know if he puts up the same amount he did this year, guarding any injuries again, which is another issue I have. I like Jamie's idea of Fedotov maybe having a better year as a backup and getting more used to and more comfortable to the NHL. I don't think he'd have any crazy numbers, but I think he'd definitely be better than what he was, and maybe he gets more comfortable in the net. Yeah, I don't know, just some little things, nothing too over the top. Like it's just so hard to kind of have that off the top of the head because I don't really think about it either.
Yeah.
Just kind
No,
of
I
things
understand that. So I'll give you mine. My first big one is I think Owen Tippett leads the team in goals this year, and I think he puts up 38. I think this is the big breakout year for Owen Tippett. I think he led the league in shot attempts last year. He's lightning fast. He had the fastest clocked in speed in the NHL last year. So I think the biggest issue with Tippett has always been him hitting the net accuracy. These shot attempts are there. If he can consistently hit the net, this guy could be a consistent 40-goal scorer. The talent is there. And I think you put him in a line with potentially a Michkov or Couturier, and Couturier hopefully finds his game back again. That could really elevate his style of play. And, I think one of the things he's going to definitely be working on over the offseason is just his ability to hit the net. I think they know that he has more. This is not his peak. His peak, he has another level to hit. And I think he ends up taking that next big step next year. I have Owen Tippett scoring 38 goals this year. I think he is going to be huge. I think this is the year we finally see what Florida saw in him when they took him at number 10 overall. My number 2 bold prediction, I like Samuel Ersson having over a .910 save percentage. He struggled in the second half of the year. I think in large part of that was getting adjusted to becoming the number 1 then versus a 1B where he was in the first half when Carter Hart was there before the obvious happened. So now that he has an entire offseason to get accustomed to it, he got all that rest. He should be now relishing in the opportunity of being the number 1 guy. Now, you still have Fedotov coming over in here. He's going to be obviously the backup or maybe even the 1B. I feel like having a guy like that pushing him is going to potentially help him find another gear. And I think now that he got a taste of almost a full season of hockey, being a number 1 goalie, he's going to elevate his game to the next level, getting more accustomed to the NHL work schedule where he really wasn't last year because he got thrown into a fire that he was in the second half of the year that he wasn't accustomed to, getting 85% of the starts. It was absurd. And you're throwing this kid who was considered technically a rookie in that position. I feel like he's going to be a lot better this year, and I think he takes a step and has about a 911, 912 save percentage. My number 3 bold prediction is Flyers end up snagging a wild card. I don't know which one, but I think they end up with. I said the wild card one originally. I think offensively they're going to take a step forward. Their power play is going to be better. Just having Michkov there, Owen Tippett's goal scoring going up. Couturier hopefully finding his first half style again, where he was the 2-way forward that we knew and loved before the back injuries happened. And hopefully the sports hernia problems are behind him. So I see the Flyers not falling off in the second half of the year like they did last year. I think they're good enough to make the playoffs potentially. I have been up and down with it. Originally, I said I didn't think they were, but the more I thought about it, the more I put perspective into the talent they have at wing, especially. They, in my opinion, they got one of the best wing cores in the NHL when you look into things. You have, I got to learn, figure out how to turn that off for the next episode. I'm sorry. But Forster, Michkov, Farabee, Konechny, Tippett, they have a lot. They have a lot. They have 5 guys who are, in my opinion, legit top 6 wingers. So those are my final predictions for this. I think the Flyers are going to be hovering around that wild card 1-2 spot for this year. But yeah, Dylan, anything else to add before we wrap things up?
As much as they shouldn't be fighting for a wild card spot, I think they will. I don't think they will fall off again. I think that was just a matter of being burnt out and fighting for so long as they did. Yeah, I don't think they should be in the conversation, but they will be. They're definitely, Michkov will definitely help that in that regard. And if Tippett does excel like you think he will, I don't see a world where it could be very difficult for them to be in that conversation.
All right. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap things up today, I did have one little special announcement to give you guys. We're going to have a big guest here, September 23rd. We're going to have a live episode in our September segment, but we're going to have Anthony DeMarco, formerly of the Fourth Period, now in the Daily Faceoff. Or did I get it mixed up?
That's right.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. Who's going to be joining us for a live episode we're going to be doing Monday, September 23rd. So looking forward to having him on along with the rest of the Flyera group. So with all that being said, everyone, thank you all for joining in. Take care, everyone. We'll see you for our next segment 2 weeks from now, when we'll go into an every week basis as stated prior. And let's go Flyers.